forget. They have a unique ability to sense emotions, understand pain, and offer comfort without being asked. What makes them special is not just their compassion, but their willingness to give their time, energy, and emotional support freely. They don't usually keep score. They don't help people because they expect something in return. They help because caring comes naturally to them. But there is a hidden danger in being this kind of person. The more an empath gives, the more some people begin to assume that their kindness will always be available. What was once appreciated slowly becomes expected. What was once valued becomes taken for granted. At first, the empath doesn't notice it. They continue answering late-night phone calls. They continue being available during emotional crises. They continue offering advice, encouragement, and support whenever someone needs them. Even when they are tired, overwhelmed, or struggling with their own problems, they still find a way to be there for others because that's who they are. They believe relationships should be built on care, understanding, and mutual respect. However, over time, something begins to feel different. The people they support rarely ask how they're doing. Conversations become one-sided. The empath is always listening, but nobody is listening to them. They are always giving, but rarely receiving. Their efforts become invisible. People begin reaching out only when they need something: a favor, advice, comfort, validation, emotional support. The empath notices that their phone lights up when others are struggling, but remains silent when they are the ones who need help. Still, they keep giving, not because they enjoy being used, but because they genuinely care. They tell themselves that everyone is busy. They make excuses for people. They convince themselves that things will eventually balance out. But deep down, a quiet disappointment starts growing. The painful reality is that many people become comfortable receiving kindness without ever learning to appreciate it. They become accustomed to the empath's presence. They assume the empath will always understand, always forgive, and always be there no matter what happens. This assumption is where the damage begins, because no matter how compassionate someone is, they are still human. They still have feelings. They still need appreciation. They still need respect. And they still need to know that their efforts matter. When kindness is constantly taken for granted, the empath starts experiencing emotional exhaustion. Every act of support begins to feel heavier. Every sacrifice becomes more noticeable. Every ignored effort leaves a deeper mark. What hurts the most isn't the giving itself. Empaths actually enjoy helping people. What hurts is realizing that their kindness is no longer seen as a gift. It's seen as an obligation. People stop saying thank you. People stop acknowledging their efforts. People start expecting emotional labor without offering anything meaningful in return, and this creates a dangerous imbalance. The empath slowly begins to understand that some relationships exist only because of what they provide. Their value is tied to their usefulness. Their presence is appreciated only when it benefits someone else. That realization is heartbreaking because empaths invest emotionally. When they care about someone, they do so wholeheartedly. They remember important dates. They celebrate victories. They support people during failures. They genuinely want the people they love to succeed. Discovering that this level of care is not reciprocated can feel like a profound betrayal. Yet even then, most empaths don't leave immediately. They give more chances. They communicate indirectly. They hope people will notice. They wait for signs of appreciation. They continue believing that things can improve. But every relationship has a breaking point. Eventually, the empath becomes tired of carrying emotional weight that was never meant to be carried alone. They become tired of always being the strong one, tired of always understanding, tired of always forgiving, tired of being available for everyone while nobody seems available for them. This exhaustion doesn't appear overnight. It builds gradually, day after day, month after month, sometimes even year after year. And because empaths rarely complain, people often don't realize how close they are to walking away. From the outside, everything appears normal. The empath still smiles, still helps, still listens. But internally, something is changing. They are beginning to detach, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of self-preservation. For the first time, they start questioning where their energy is going. They start asking whether certain relationships are truly healthy. They begin recognizing patterns they ignored before. They see who only calls when they need something. They see who disappears when support is needed in return. They see who values them as a person and who values them merely as a resource. And once an empath gains this clarity, it becomes impossible to unsee it. The emotional connection that once felt strong starts fading. The enthusiasm disappears. The willingness to keep sacrificing begins to vanish. The empath stops chasing people, stops overextending themselves, stops giving endless chances, not because they have stopped caring, but because they have finally started caring about themselves too. This is often the moment that surprises everyone. People assume the empath will always stay. They assume forgiveness has no limits. They assume kindness has no boundaries. But every empath eventually learns a lesson that changes everything. Their compassion is valuable. Their energy is valuable. Their time is valuable. And those gifts should never be continuously given to people who refuse to appreciate them. When that lesson finally takes hold, the empath doesn't usually create drama. They don't announce their departure. They don't seek revenge. They simply become less available, less invested, less willing to sacrifice themselves for people who never truly valued what they offered. And one day, the people who took their kindness for granted look around and realize the empath is gone. The support they once relied on has disappeared. The understanding they expected is no longer there. The person they assumed would stay forever has quietly chosen peace over being taken for granted. By the time others recognize what they lost, the empath has already learned one of life's most important truths: genuine kindness should be appreciated, not expected, and the people who value your heart will never make you question your worth. Trust is one of the most valuable things an empath can offer. Unlike many people who build walls around themselves, empaths tend to open their hearts with sincerity. They believe in seeing the good in others. They want to believe that people are honest, loyal, and capable of treating others with respect. When an empath chooses to trust someone, it is never a casual decision. They are allowing that person into their emotional world, a place that very few people ever truly get to see. For an empath, trust is more than believing someone's words. It is believing in their intentions. It is feeling safe enough to share fears, dreams, insecurities, and personal struggles without worrying that those vulnerabilities will be used against them. That is why betrayal affects an empath so deeply. It doesn't just damage a relationship. It damages a sense of emotional safety that took a long time to build. The first betrayal is usually met with understanding. An empath often tries to see the situation from the other person's perspective. They tell themselves that everyone makes mistakes. They consider the possibility that the person didn't mean to cause harm. They search for explanations instead of immediately judging. This ability to empathize with others is one of their greatest strengths, but it can also become one of their greatest weaknesses. Because while they are busy understanding everyone else's behavior, they sometimes ignore their own pain. When someone lies to them, breaks a promise, shares a secret, or acts in a way that violates their trust, the empath feels hurt. Yet instead of immediately walking away, they often give another chance. They hope the betrayal was an isolated incident rather than a reflection of someone's true character. They believe people can grow. They believe people can learn from mistakes. They believe relationships are worth fighting for, but trust becomes fragile once it has been broken. Even when forgiveness is given, a small crack remains beneath the surface. The empath may continue the relationship, but part of them becomes more cautious. They begin paying closer attention. They start noticing inconsistencies they previously ignored. They become more aware of words that don't match actions. The second betrayal feels different. The pain is no longer coming from the event itself. The pain comes from realizing that the first chance was not valued. The empath begins to question whether their kindness is being mistaken for weakness. They start wondering if the person genuinely regrets their actions or simply assumes forgiveness will always be available. This is where emotional distance often begins. The empath may still communicate. They may still show kindness. They may still try to maintain the relationship, but internally they are protecting themselves. The trust that once felt natural now requires effort. The confidence they once had in the relationship starts fading. The problem with repeated betrayal is that it creates a pattern, and empaths pay attention to patterns. While others may focus on individual incidents, empaths often look at the bigger picture. They notice recurring behavior. They observe repeated disappointments. They recognize when promises are consistently broken and when apologies never lead to meaningful change. Eventually, they stop asking whether someone made a mistake. They start asking whether the mistake is actually a habit. That realization changes everything, because empaths are willing to forgive mistakes. What they struggle to forgive is repeated disrespect. Every broken promise sends a message. Every lie sends a message. Every act of dishonesty sends a message. And over time, the message becomes impossible to ignore. It says, "Your trust is not being valued." This realization creates a deep emotional conflict within the empath. Part of them wants to continue believing in the person. Part of them wants to preserve the connection they once cherished. But another part understands that trust cannot survive without consistency. A healthy relationship requires more than words. It requires actions that reinforce safety. Without those actions, trust slowly erodes. Many people assume that an empath will tolerate endless betrayal because they are compassionate. What they fail to understand is that compassion does not eliminate boundaries. In fact, some of the strongest boundaries often belong to people who have been hurt repeatedly. Empaths do not leave because they stop caring. They leave because they finally realize caring is not enough to sustain a relationship. A relationship cannot survive on hope alone. It cannot survive on promises alone. It cannot survive on apologies alone. At some point, actions must align with words. When that alignment never happens, the empath begins withdrawing emotionally. This withdrawal is usually quiet. There are no dramatic confrontations, no public arguments, no attempts to seek revenge. The empath simply starts investing less energy. They stop sharing personal details. They stop seeking emotional closeness. They stop depending on someone who has repeatedly proven unreliable. The person who caused the betrayal may not even notice at first. Everything appears normal on the surface. The empath continues being polite, continues being respectful, continues avoiding unnecessary conflict, but the emotional bond that once connected them is slowly disappearing. What many people fail to realize is that empaths rarely make impulsive decisions about relationships. By the time they decide to walk away, they have usually spent months or even years trying to repair the damage. They have analyzed every conversation. They have replayed countless memories. They have searched for reasons to stay. Leaving is often their last option, not their first. That is why their departure can seem sudden to others. But for the empath, the decision was made long before they physically left. The repeated betrayals gradually pushed them toward acceptance. Acceptance that trust cannot be forced. Acceptance that loyalty cannot be demanded. Acceptance that some people simply are not willing to protect the connection they were given. Once an empath reaches this stage, something powerful happens. They stop trying to convince people to change. They stop explaining the same pain over and over again. They stop waiting for someone to become the person they hoped they would be. Instead, they focus on protecting their own peace. They choose emotional safety over emotional uncertainty. They choose self-respect over endless disappointment. And perhaps most importantly, they choose to believe what people's actions have been telling them all along. The greatest mistake someone can make is assuming an empath's forgiveness is limitless. Forgiveness may be abundant, but trust is different. Trust is earned through consistency, protected through honesty, and strengthened through respect. Once repeated betrayal destroys that foundation, the empath eventually realizes that no amount of love can compensate for a relationship where trust no longer exists. And when that realization finally settles in, they quietly walk away, carrying with them a lesson they will never forget. The people who truly value your heart will never repeatedly place it in situations where it has to break. One of the deepest wounds an empath can experience is being made to feel unworthy or unimportant. Unlike harsh criticism or obvious rejection, this kind of pain often develops slowly. It is created through repeated moments of neglect, dismissal, and emotional indifference. Over time, these experiences send a message that no empath should ever have to hear: you do not matter as much as you think you do. Empaths naturally invest themselves in the people they care about. They pay attention to details that others overlook. They remember important conversations. They notice changes in someone's mood. They offer encouragement during difficult times and celebrate even the smallest victories. Their love is often expressed through actions rather than words. They show up when others need support. They listen without judgment. They make people feel seen, heard, and understood. Because of this, empaths often assume that the people they care about will treat them with the same level of consideration. Unfortunately, that is not always what happens. Sometimes they find themselves in relationships where their efforts are expected but rarely appreciated. They give their time, they give their energy, they give their emotional support, yet very little comes back in return. At first, the empath may not think much of it. They understand that people get busy. They know that everyone faces challenges. They are willing to be patient. They are willing to give others the benefit of the doubt. But when the pattern continues, the emotional impact begins to grow. The empath notices that they are always the one reaching out first. They notice that their messages go unanswered, while everyone else's seem to receive immediate attention. They notice that their feelings are often dismissed or overlooked. They notice that their needs are treated as less important than everyone else's. These moments may seem small individually, but together they create a powerful emotional burden. Every ignored effort leaves a mark. Every forgotten promise creates disappointment. Every act of emotional neglect adds another layer of hurt. The painful part is that empaths rarely demand attention. They rarely ask for recognition. They do not need constant praise. What they need is something much simpler. They need to feel valued. They need to feel respected. They need to know that their presence matters. When those needs are consistently ignored, the empath begins questioning their place in the relationship. They wonder whether their efforts are truly appreciated. They wonder whether their feelings carry any significance. They wonder whether the people they care about would even notice if they stopped giving so much. These questions can become emotionally exhausting. Because empaths are naturally self-reflective, they often look inward before looking outward. Instead of immediately blaming others, they ask themselves difficult questions. Am I expecting too much? Am I being too sensitive? Am I asking for something unreasonable? Could I be the problem? This tendency to self-examine can sometimes make the situation even more painful. Rather than recognizing the lack of appreciation around them, they begin questioning their own worth. They start wondering whether they deserve better treatment. They begin doubting qualities that once made them confident. This is where emotional neglect becomes particularly damaging. It slowly chips away at self-worth, not through one dramatic event, but through countless small experiences that communicate the same message. You are not a priority. You are not important. You are only noticed when someone needs something from you. For a long time, the empath may continue trying harder. They may become even more supportive, even more understanding, even more patient. They believe that if they give enough love, enough effort, and enough compassion, things will eventually change. They hope their value will finally be recognized. They hope their sacrifices will finally be appreciated. But the truth is that no amount of effort can force someone to appreciate what they refuse to value. Eventually, the empath begins to feel emotionally drained. The relationship no longer feels balanced. Instead of feeling connected, they feel invisible. As we come to the end of this discussion, one truth becomes clear. Empaths do not walk away because they are weak, cold, or unforgiving. They walk away because they have reached a point where protecting their peace becomes more important than preserving relationships that continuously drain them. Whether it is having their kindness taken for granted, experiencing repeated betrayals of trust, enduring emotional manipulation, or being made to feel unworthy and unimportant, every wound leaves a mark. Yet empaths often tolerate far more than most people realize before deciding to leave. What makes their departure so powerful is its silence. They rarely seek revenge. They rarely create drama. They do not spend their time trying to hurt the people who hurt them. Instead, they quietly withdraw their energy, their attention, and their emotional investment. By the time they leave, they have usually spent countless nights questioning themselves, giving second chances, and hoping things would change. The lesson here is not only about empaths. It is about the value of respect, honesty, appreciation, and emotional responsibility in every relationship. No one should have to constantly prove their worth. No one should be expected to tolerate manipulation, neglect, or repeated disappointment. Healthy relationships are built on mutual care, trust, and understanding. If you have an